as colleagues. And we'll also talk about some of the things that have been helpful for you or anything you'd like us to do differently. So we'll have some time at the end to do that. But welcome all. And Nora, why don't you take it away?
Sorry, I was muted. Got some construction happening right outside the house, so keep trying to mute when that happens. Okay, so anyway, today we're covering these 3 knowledge areas. And Sherry, sorry if you'd already covered that. I was distracted by the construction noise. So hopefully you've already been able to listen to Rick's most excellent presentations around professionalism and ethics, laws and regulations, and governance and organizational structure. Yeah, just a few like not important sections at all in the exam, right? No, but these are absolutely vital. And again, professionalism and ethics is what ACHE is all about. Laws and regulations, you know, next to finance is probably the one that's like the most detailed in terms of what you do need to know. And governance and organizational structure, you know, that's one I'm still weak in. So I always appreciate getting to hear this presentation because I learn something new every time. Okay, next. Again, in case you've forgotten who we are, introducing ourselves again. And again, I want to put out there, several of you have already approached me about being a reference for you, and we would be proud and honored. All of us are available for being a reference for you and helping walk you through this process. And so next slide, please. And the famous San Diego Organization of Healthcare Leaders as well. Again, I can't express enough how proud we are to be hosting this together. Okay, next slide. Okay, so updates and FAQs. We did promise to follow up on the business in the business knowledge area of Porter's 5 forces analysis, which I had never heard of. So thank you, Sherry, for sending me that information. And then I found this article that I found very, very interesting. And Sherry, you were going to just mention what those 5 forces are.
I appreciate it. Competition in the industry, potential new entrants, power of suppliers, power of the customer, and threat of substitute products. So we appreciate that we had that conversation around that in terms of the business aspect for this. Thank you.
And another reminder that we will be sending a Survey Monkey out after next week's session, which will be the last session. So take notes on if, you know, what you think we've done well, what you'd like to see done better. Trust me, we do use these responses. Also, one of the things I forgot to put on here, and Sherry will expand on, is we really appreciated the brainwalk that people put on the chat about how you answered what you answered. And we're going to do that again today. And we might call on people. So beware, be ready.
And thank you, Nora, because I think I looked at one of the exercises we did, and folks putting things in like C is the broadest answer choice. Great observation, great brainwalk. It's more global and strategic, most comprehensive answer, and mission value established by the governing board. So that was one example of a great interaction. And keep doing that in the chat room. And it's really how you will become more comfortable with the questions and the process. So thank you.
Okay, next slide. Okay, Sherry, this is your expertise.
We will just continue to do our heart-focused breathing and whatever breathing exercises work for you for the questions. And reiterate that you have 6 hours, and just referring back to what Jennifer shared with us, and I think we thought that too was an important concept, is how you decide to set up your study notes. And for any topic, a grid works well, a table. That way you have the visual real quick, because you're going to want to answer the question quick. So if you look at all the some of the things we're going to do today, you'll probably be able to visualize how to put it in a table or a grid, so you can define between the different regulations and so forth. So that's it.
So one of the things that I forgot to mention before we go to the next slide is, I don't know how many of you participated in the ACHE Congress recently this past week. Absolutely fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And I don't know how many of you that participated got to attend an advancement information session, but I was able to sit in on one, and it was very, very interesting. And there's another one coming up in June. I have it on the original overview presentation, and we more or less covered everything in our overview presentation. But what I think is valuable is that it's live, and you get to hear questions and answers, and they do go over some of the information in the BOG exam, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. Again, it's not until June, so some of you may have already started down that path, but and it's recorded. They do have recordings, so I highly recommend going out and checking out one of those sessions. Sorry, go ahead. Next slide. Okay, Rick.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute before I start talking this time. I think that works better. I'll try it. So, as was said, professionalism ethics is a big thing for ACHE generally in terms of its mission. So I think that does show up on the exam. And if I had to give one piece of advice on this one, I'd say really familiarize yourself with the Code of Ethics, the ACHE Code of Ethics, and also the ethics statements that go beyond the specific Code of Ethics. I don't think anyone's going to think that you're going to memorize the entire Code of Ethics. I wouldn't recommend doing that. But you might look at how it's organized, the 5 focuses that it has, and get familiar with the types of things that come under each one. And that way, if there is anything that related more specifically to the code, you'll have a kind of a framework to put it in. They also want you to at least have a slight knowledge about some of the other professional associations, particularly AMA and ANA. So it's worth just having a good idea of what their codes are. Again, not really specific, but have a sense of what they cover. Ethics committees is an important one as well. So more of an applied thing of what do we do with the codes as well. Conflict of interest just seems to keep popping up, and I guess it's popping up for a reason, probably because we had some conflicts of interest or something, but be aware of how that works. Next slide, please. Okay. The consequences is an interesting one. So if you are a member of ACHE or a fellow of ACHE and you are accused of unethical conduct, not that I would expect that from anyone, but just in case, what happens? What is ACHE's process? And that's in there for you to take a look at as well. Human subjects, of course. One thing that I'm not seeing here, but I think can show up under professionalism, and I don't know if it ever really does show up on the exam, but it's probably worth at least taking a look at, is ACHE's programs for people who are involved in the profession. So, for example, the various awards and the point systems, things like that. I think it's worth taking a look at. For those of you taking the test, has anyone had a question on that? Not hearing.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall it either, but it's there, so it's probably worth taking a look at. Okay. So again, the biggest thing to concentrate on is the Code of Ethics, and a lot of these other more specific points will come out of that. Next slide.
Okay, this is when the questions begin, and I think I have the evens. Yes. Okay. So again, we're going to be doing the brain walk, so we really want to see some comments here. The primary task of an ethics committee is to arbitrate conflicting decisions by caregivers after the patient and or immediate family are notified about the matter. Develop the organization's ethics plan. Act as a surrogate body for regular decision makers such as physicians, patients, and families when conflicts arise. And formulate policy and educate hospital personnel about healthcare ethics in general. Rick, we'd really love your true false thing going on. Okay, looks like we have some Ds.
Why did you pick D if you just type in real quick?
And I honestly don't remember the answer, so even I'm having trouble getting to do this. Okay, D, the most global.
We have more global, most comprehensive, right?
Well, so if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I do believe that D is the most global, because yeah, you've got to set it up before you even begin to develop it, right? I don't know, between B, right, and D.
I would go with B on this one, and I could be wrong, but it seems like D follows B. You've got to start with your plan and then get into more specific stuff. A is wrong because you don't actually arbitrate. You might mediate, and you're not a decision maker if you're on a ethics committee. You're a teacher and an advisor. So it is B or D, and I would go with the broader one, B.
Okay, and answer is
D.
Okay.
okay. Yeah, you know, interesting. Yeah, that one is an interesting one. Okay.
And so again, you don't have to get 100% on the test, as I just proved. It's not like I teach this or anything.
Okay, Michael.
Hi, good morning. A conflict of interest may be only a matter of degree. Hold on. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. Degree,
Want me to take over?
but does exist when a healthcare executive refuses to A, accept gifts or benefits with implied expectation of influencing a management decision. So just take note, this is a lot, so you have to slow down and really understand every sentences that's being written here. B, use authority or information to make a decision that intentionally affects the organization in adverse manner. C, disclose the appropriate authority, any direct or indirect financial or personal interest that pose potential questions. And D, allow a friend to benefit from his or her authority or inside information. Anybody can, share their thoughts about this. And let's do a brain walk.
Getting a lot of C's.
Nice.
C.
Yeah, lots of C's.
So there's a comment here, the negative can be tricky. However, it speaks to the conflict being a problem and it is a failure to disclose. Oh, good thought, Jennifer. So let's find the answer. Next slide, please. It's C. So disclose to the appropriate authority any direct or indirect financial or personal interest that pose potential questions, which is transparency. I would, because we need to be transparent, right?
The omission versus commission. There you go. See, you guys got it. Got it wired.
Mention that the other three are things that you should be doing. They're not conflicts.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please.
Okay. The major purpose of a code of ethics for members of a healthcare executives association is to provide guidance to members in their own professional conduct, increase public understanding of the professional association, provide a framework for disciplining members when necessary, provide a framework for annually evaluating professional performance. And again, on purpose, I didn't go over these answers before. So let's see what my brain walk says. Oh, where are we going so far? We're seeing A's. Let's see. So yeah, provide guidance to members. Increase public understanding. Well, I think the code of ethics for members is geared towards members, although it does help the public to understand what the association is. Provide a framework. Yes, but what is the broader one? Provide guidance and provide a framework. Again, I think providing guidance is the broadest. So yeah, okay. Some of the stuff I'm reading here. Okay, next slide.
Like most people picked that.
Yeah, there it is. Code, what is and isn't. Okay, yeah, the guidance. Everything else flows from that. Agreed. Okay. Next slide. Okay.
A non-legitimate reason to release information from a patient's medical record is when. So remember the word non-legitimate reason. So that's going to be the keywords that I'm going to be using if I'm answering this question. So selections A, subpoenaed by a court order. B, requested by the spouse or next of kin. C, the patient becomes incompetent. D, reporting statistics for a research project. So it looks like the question is, the following are legitimate except. So if I will translate that, that question. So the answer should be the except, which is the non-legitimate reason. So subpoenaed by a court order, do you think that's a legitimate reason to release the information? I would probably say true or false. Yes, right, true. B, requested by the spouse or next of kin. So I'll put that a question mark. And C, the patient becomes incompetent. I would probably say true on that. Then D, reporting statistics for a research project. I don't know about that too. So the remaining selection is B or D here. So I would go for B. And what's the answers in the chat box? D,
We've
B.
got B, D.
Okay. D is not legit. Okay. Good. And let's find the answer. And the survey says B. Yay. Requested by spouse or next of kin.
And from what I recall before, Rick, the qualifier here is that there could be reason. I mean, if the spouse or next of kin has power of attorney or some document, I mean, so it needed to be qualified, but again, that's the one that is like the most non-legit reason.
Yeah.
The statistics one, and Sarah Khan put this in the chat, is correct that she's presuming that these are de-identified, that we've taken out anything that could help us tell who the patient is. And as long as you do that, you can report anything. So both B and D might change if you added a qualifier, but I think B is the most correct in just a general sense. You can't walk in and ask for your spouse's medical records. Well, you can, they just shouldn't give it to you.
Okay, next question. Okay, which of the following conditions must be met for human subjects to be used in a medical research program? Oh, hey, we were just talking about that. No suitable animal model exists for use instead of people. The research program has been approved by the medical staff. The research program has been approved by the governing authority, And risks should be clearly explained in understandable language to each individual subject. Okay. Which of these conditions must be met? Okay, so there's, let's see, no suitable animal model exists. I'm not sure about that one. If that's a requirement for human subject trials. A research program must have been approved by the medical staff. Well, there's a lot of things that can be approved by the medical staff, but a research program has been approved by the governing authority. Yeah, but what's the broadest? I would believe it'd be the risks should be clearly explained. So the whole thing, consent. I mean, I think consent overrides everything. What are we getting? We're getting
C's and D's. It looks like we're tied between C's and D's.
okay. So
Someone is interpreting C as the IRB or delegated from the governing board to the IRB. It does take IRB approval, but I don't think the entire governing board wants to spend a lot of time on each research project, particularly in a large research institute.
Mhm.
okay, so the answer is D.
And can I say something about this? The medical research program also follows the consent approval, like we do with the patient. It needs to be understandable. Those the elements of a consent understandable, voluntary, and risk and benefit should be communicated. So.
And let's also point out that throughout medical history, we've done a lot of experimentation on people without their consent. So this is really a post-World War II concept that we can't just walk in and start experimenting on people.
Yeah.
And that's the saddest part of our history, I think, or one of them.
So we're getting a question from Sarah about like all the questions written this vaguely. Not all of them, some of them will jump out at you, but we also have a comment up there about how to be very specific when you're looking at human subjects, and D in terms of consent is like, the way I interpret it is that is the single most important thing. All these other things may be all good and we have them, but if we don't get consent, then we can't use that subject. But yeah, this is Sarah directly. This is why we're offering these sessions, because how to interpret these questions is the entire challenge of it in my mind. Okay, yeah, people are appreciating this brain walk. I like it. Thank you. Okay, next question.
Oh, it's the same. Next.
Is it?
Okay, next. Number 6. All of the following are commonly recognized to be a right of each patient except the right to A, receive considerate and respectful care, B, access protective services, C, communicate with a caregiver in the language of the patient's choosing, and D, be informed about and participate in decisions regarding their care. So this question is again, it's the same, like all are the following except. So what is the exclusion there in the selection? Receive considerate and respectful care. That's true, correct? I believe that's true. And B, access protective services. Yeah, that's the right. Communicate with a caregiver in the language of the patient's choosing. I don't know if that is correct. So that's going to be probably my first exception there. And D, be informed about and participate in decisions regarding their care. And this is, for me, it's another true right. So
I want to chime in on this one.
Go ahead.
B obviously is by law. You can't block someone from calling, say, Adult Protective Services. D, obviously, the consent is important. So C is really amorphous. What do we mean by consider? What do we mean by respectful? Where it should be A is consider respectful, very amorphous, but communicating in a language is very, very specific. So the question is there a specific right? And I think that at least since the 1970s, 80s, we've had a growing awareness of the need to communicate in a culturally effective way, which does include language. So raise your hand if you've never seen a healthcare provider treating someone disrespectfully. Anyone ever not seen that? Right. So therefore, I wish that was true. I wish that we had a right to be treated respectfully, but I think we know, no, it doesn't happen. So I'd be inclined to go A on this one.
Okay, let's find the answer. Next slide, C.
Oh, there you go. I still think A is the right answer. I want to argue this one with the teacher.
Yeah, you know, we've had issues with this question before, and I believe that the reason it is C is because it may not always be possible to have someone available for that. But the thought process now is, even though considerate and respectful care is amorphous, that is the expectation. Would we like to have someone have a language of a patient's choosing? Yes. But it's not as broad as the other three answers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the chat says, is it achievable though? I think that's a good point. Is it achievable to have all those language available?
Sure.
Yeah.
We've got translator services on the phone. We can do it if we choose to.
So yeah, this another amorphous, vaguely worded question. Well, I wouldn't say it's vague, but the answers, you know, and it could be, again, this is an older question. I don't know, it might be different now. But again, when we're trying to see, I see in the brain walk, you know, you're being very careful and cognizant and trying to look at each of the questions.
And sometimes you're going to flip a coin, you know, and you're not going to get 100%. It's okay. I still want to know about the Klingon translator that someone's asking about, and I'm wondering if that's ever occurred.
Oh, Klingon.
Efton Hall just raised a hand.
I think this is one of those questions that in California, this is like not optional. It may be in other states, it's not as easy. But this is in all of our admission paperwork, our consents and stuff, that they will have access in their language. So that's what this one is, a very confusing one, because we do this here in California.
So,
and a good point that the test is based on national principles, not on state principles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a good point there in the comment that it may not be maybe available because there are languages for which medical translators are not readily available, which is true, right?
Yep, but it is a patient right.
Yeah,
it's confusing because the way it's asked,
and
yeah,
it's in our patient rights.
So, you know, we're getting good points from questions that we're answering wrong. So, and like Rick says, you know, might not get all of them right, but I like seeing how you're approaching dissecting the questions. Okay, next.
Nora?
That are reflected in everyday actions. Am I freezing? Okay, the sole province of senior management, parts of governing bodies' formal actions and written Am I frozen still?
No, you're good.
Can you hear me? Okay, all right. Okay, so organizational precepts. Okay, now remember, be very, very careful about when it says sole province of senior man. I mean, you know, that's awfully narrow. Reflected in everyday actions. Well, we'd like to think so. These formal actions and written and unwritten. This is a good one. Again, I don't know the answer to this. So what are we getting? Getting a lot of D's?
We're getting these, yeah. The broadest choice.
Okay. So if we're looking at D, yeah, because yes, we do see them reflected in everyday actions. It's not the sole province of senior management. And part of the governing body's formal action. So right there, there is one that says unwritten in A, and there is one that says written, which is C. We know it's not B, so D is the broadest.
When I first read this one a minute ago, I was thinking, I went back and looked to see if there was a negative that I'd missed, because it seems like A, B, and D are correct. So I thought maybe it was all except, which would make, excuse me, A, C, and D. So maybe it would be except, which would make B the right answer, but it's not there. So I think, again, I would go with D.
And, oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, so I'm seeing comments. D is the broadest choice. And then, yeah, when you honed in on the location of resources, yeah, again, you know, we all know, we walk into some organizations that believe that, you know, they espouse that they have, you know, ethical precepts, that don't always live them. But yeah, that was a hard one. I'm having trouble expressing how that fits. But again, D, we all do know that there are a variety of sources that include the unwritten, the expectations, the unwritten expectations. Okay.
Nora, in
Michael, this is
the
yours.
interest of time, I'm wondering if we should not do the last few on each of these and be able to fit all three in. It's great discussion, but we're going to run out of time if we want to do Quizlet and stuff at the end. So
Okay.
maybe move ahead to the law section.
I agree.
Next slide then.
So who's got the slides? Yeah.
We do have
Okay,
A
so
for
there we
that
go.
last one, conflict of
Okay.
interest.
Okay, so laws is one of the areas that does require that you be familiar with a bunch of specific things. And what I strongly recommend is make yourself a table where you can identify all the laws you run across. So as you're reading review stuff, as you're reading questions, put them on one side, put the year it was enacted and one sentence to remind yourself of what it does. And then just use that as a study thing to try to figure it out or try to get it into your head. In the video, I put in categories that you might want to use as well. That just helps me categorize them in my own head of the types of laws. And I can think along and say, okay, well, what is this law doing? Is it antitrust? Is it patient protection or whatever? I can it helps me keep track of all of them. This would be a really good time for me to tell my HIPAA joke, which Nora is going to get very upset if I don't do. So therefore, I must tell my annual HIPAA joke, which is knock, knock. Nora?
Who's there? Who's
HIPAA.
there?
HIPAA.
HIPAA who?
I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to tell you that.
Gets me every time.
No matter how many times she's heard it, she still laughs. It's one of the reasons I like her. Anyway, but be familiar with that. And specifically, you see an emphasis on the patient rights one. So HIPAA, informed consent. We saw informed consent with ethics as well. Some of the end of life directives, be familiar with those as well. And remember that we're talking national, not state law on this.
And can I add also that some of the laws that's being discussed here are all the overlap with the human resources laws and rules and regulations. So be nice if you can just create spreadsheet that would differentiate those two also.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you see overlap with HR, you see overlap with ethics. It's hard to separate many of these areas. In their outline, ACHE puts contract law under management rather than under law, where I think of it as part of law. But don't worry about where the divisions are, just know that you have to know those different areas. So let's go to the next slide. Profit versus nonprofit. So have some idea or some understanding of what it means to be a nonprofit. What are the requirements to maintain your status? And you're talking again the federal level 501c3 Internal Revenue Code, not the state laws. And then finally, the last one you see is the one that Michael was talking about of the overlap on operations, finance, and HR. Okay. So let's move to the questions.
Okay, who does odds on laws? Oh, Michael, that's you.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you. So question number 1, ownership and control of medical records associated with hospital delivered services tests with the A, hospital, B, physician, C, patient, or A, insurer. So this is the question that for me, it's, the answer is very obvious. However, I still need to go through all the, the selection to make it sure that there are no detractors there. So let's go to the answer, A. So, yeah, answer is A, the hospital. So mostly this is related to the HIPAA Privacy Act, wherein the owner of the records are the one who initiated the care. For example, if the physician's clinic, they are the one who initiated the care and they have the documentation there, then they are the owner of those records. For hospital, if it's the hospital, it's the hospital.
And differentiate between the ownership of the record itself, physical or digital, versus the information. Patients do have a right to their own information, but they do not have a right to control the physical document.
Yeah. Next slide, please.
Okay, so that'd be me, right? Yep. Okay, the rules governing the acceptance and treatment of emergency patients are known as, and again, my daughter just is like, how many acronyms can an industry have? Well, it's really important to know what these stand for. So EMTALA, we won't expand on what they are yet. EEOC, STARK2, and COBRA. It's really important to know which of these are, and I'm seeing a bunch of A's in here, so that must mean we know that EMTALA means the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act.
Active labor. Active labor.
Sorry?
Active labor.
Okay. There, see? I didn't even need to know it, but at least I knew enough about the E to know that it meant emergency. And, and it's right there in the sentence. EEOC, equal employment opportunity, right, Rick?
Yeah.
STARK2, safe harbor stuff, and COBRA having to do with Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which has a whole host of things, among which are portability of insurance. Anyway, so I'd go with A. Answer is, and there it is. So yeah, pretty much most of us know that.
Except just to make things really complicated, EMTALA was actually passed as part of the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, COBRA, and there were people early on who referred to it as COBRA versus EMTALA. There was a joke about being bitten by the cobra if you broke it, but so that one actually could be a little confusing, but EMTALA is much more specific in this case, much more correct.
I don't think I knew that.
Someone is asking, can you briefly explain other options? And I'm not sure which other options you want. Can you be more specific of what you'd like us to ask or answer?
Oh, about what those acronyms are? Is that what you were looking for?
No, I'm looking at the chat room. Someone is saying, can you briefly explain other options? Oh, explain them. So, okay, so EMTALA is the one that says you have to do the the initial screening exam, and then stabilize patients who are found to have an emergency. Equal opportunity means that you can't, in your hiring and treatment of employees, you cannot be biased against them for a list of reasons. Start 2 is the one that says that you cannot, a physician cannot refer patients to a ancillary service such as a lab that the physician owns. And yeah, COBRA just is a consolidated omnibus. It just included a ton of stuff in there, some health related, some not related. Did that answer the question?
It appears, yes.
Yeah. So, so the key thing here is, if you know the laws, if you've made this table that we're talking about, then seeing acceptance and treatment of emergency patients, well, it's not treating employees, it's not referring patients. You can just eliminate COBRA generally now, and process of elimination, it's got to be Abtella.
Better said than I did. Thank you.
Yeah, Sachin points out that it's, even if you don't know what they are, excuse me, even if you don't know what Abtella stands for, the others are pretty well known and you can eliminate them. Next slide.
Which of the following is the clear trend regarding a hospital's liability for the actions of members of its medical staff? A, the hospital may be held liable for a physician's negligence even though the physician is an independent contractor. B, hospitals are not liable for such actions because they are simply physical sites where patients receive treatment from privately retained physicians. C, courts are becoming more reluctant to impose liability on hospitals for the negligence of physicians who use their facilities. And D, the hospital is liable only if the physician is an employee. So for this question, I would probably apply the true or false in each selection and see which is the best answer. So it looks like people are, I can see some A and C as a selection here. Let's apply the true or false, right? The hospital, selection A, the hospital may be held liable for a physician's negligence even though the physician is an independent contractor. That's true, right? B, hospitals are not liable for such actions because they are simply physical sites where patients receive treatment from privately retained physicians. I think that's so-so. I think it's between true or false. And C, courts are becoming more reluctant to impose liability on hospitals for the negligence of physicians who use their facilities. They are not reluctant in imposing liability on hospitals for negligence. I think they are. So this is going to be false for me. And D is the hospital is liable only if the physician is an employee. This for me is false. So my selection would be D for this. Let's see if I'm correct. Next slide. Oh, I failed. So the correct answer is A, the hospital may be held liable for a physician's negligence even though the physician is an independent contractor, because I think hospital is liable for anyone, for any actions of anyone who are in the facility or within their vicinity. Am I correct, Rick?
Yeah, the key thing here, as someone pointed out, is clear trend. And B used to be a good solid argument, particularly for nonprofits. C, I think, again, nonprofits used to be more than it is now. We've never had a requirement that be only an employee, because it could also be an agent. So the trend of A is the ostensible agent. So someone who you are holding out as your employee or agent, even if they're not, such as a hospitalist. So that's definitely the trend. And that's why I think it's important there in the question to see clear trend as important language.
That works. I agree. Oh, okay, now we're not, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. In general, courts exhibit what attitude regarding controversies over medical staff privileges? Human lives are at stake and the courts must intervene to protect physicians' rights to save those lives. If the decision were supported by reasonable evidence, courts will not substitute their judgment for that of the hospital board. Hospitals must not be permitted to interfere with the doctor-patient relationship, or courts may not entertain suits regarding medical staff privileges. Okay, so again, reading the question, and then this directly relates to the question we just read earlier. So what are courts doing now? Human lives are at stake and courts must intervene to protect physicians' rights to save those lives. May be true. If the decision were supported by reasonable evidence, courts will not substitute their judgment for that of the hospital board. The key, Rick, this is perfect because of your JD also. Read the whole reasonable evidence thing, right? If it were supported by reasonable evidence, how would the court act? Will they or will they not substitute their judgment? If it's reasonable,
it's not so much the reasonable evidence as the substituting judgment. Courts don't like to substitute, particularly in areas that they're really not familiar with. So unless you're being arbitrary and capricious, that's the reasonable evidence, they're less likely to substitute judgment.
So C, hospitals must not be permitted to interfere. Well, they have, I mean, more and more the expectation is that they do. And courts may not entertain suits regarding medical staff privileges. That not in there just jumps out. Remember, we need to be really careful about firm words like that.
Well, and you have that in both A, C, and D. You've got must intervene, may not, must not be permitted, may not entertain. Very absolute language.
Right. I would go with, what are we getting? We're getting lots of.
They're spread out. Yeah, lots of them spread out there.
B's, we're getting B's.
We're getting one, reasonable evidence and substitute judgment are the key. So let's go with B. I think we're getting B's in there. The answer is, and there it is. So yeah, this one we had to dissect each and every little sentence in there. So I think this was a good question. Again, the brain walk's very helpful. Yes, the brain walk works for this.
And as we'll talk about in governance in a few minutes, the hospital board is ultimately responsible for the medical staff's actions and for medical staff membership. So that impacts this one as well.
Question number 5. A joint venture laboratory owned by a hospital and physicians on its medical staff would probably in violation of fraud and abuse laws if it were to A, market its services to both investors and non-investors, B, offer ownership shares at the same price to referrers and non-referrers, C, require investors to refer business to it, D, base its profit distribution on the amount of capital contributed, not on referrals. This is a hard question for me.
I'll walk through it if you like. A is there's nothing fraudulent there of just letting everyone in the world invest in you. It would be fraud if you did give a special price to people refer, but not doing that, offering at the same price is fine. Requiring investors to refer business, that's when you start getting into Start 2. And then, Start 2 or kickback statute, any of those. And then base its profits on referrals. If you're paying people based on how many patients they send you, you're in violation. But if you're doing it based on capital contributed, you're fine. So A, B, and D are fine, and therefore C has to be the right answer. And if you're requiring your investors to refer business, then you're obviously in violation of fraud laws. So I would go with C.
And the answer is next slide, C. And I think also this question, the analogy between the Stark Law and fraud and abuse is also essential in this, because the Stark Law is only for laboratory or for physicians. However, fraud and abuse refers to everything, not only physicians, also the other, healthcare professionals. So anti-kickback. So knowledge also of the anti-kickback. Thank you for that in the chat. So next slide.
Okay, the thrust of antitrust legislation, there we go, antitrust, as applied to the healthcare field is to contain costs, contain rising costs of independent single unit hospital, monitor the scope of health services provided in a given area, or protect the public's economic interest. Well, antitrust legislation doesn't care about containing costs. So A and B are out. Monitor the scope of health services. I think that's more, antitrust doesn't have to do with monopolies, does it? It does?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Or protect the public's economic interest. Did I act stupid just then? Protect the public's economic interest. I think the broadest then, if monitoring scope under monopoly goes right in with protecting the public's economic interest. So I think D is the broadest.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're getting lots of Ds.
Antitrust is trying to protect the marketplace to make it function, and that could result in lower costs, but it could also result in higher value. So,
and it's also known as the competition laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, to provide, to prevent any monopoly within the marketplace.
Okay, so yeah, okay, there it is. So D.
I love antitrust law, but my students don't.
If anything, this is pointing out that I'm still really weak in this area as well.
Go back and watch the video.
Yeah, true.
So question number 7, 2 independent healthcare organizations interested in discussing a joint venture to initiate a cancer treatment program should be wise to initially consult with their legal counsel to determine if their A, liabilities equal even though disproportionately owned, B, financial gains or losses can be shared unequally, D, discussion might violate antitrust statutes, D, current facilities can accommodate the program. So this question also is related to number 6, actually, correct? So this is about expanding your business or service line. So, as a healthcare leader, executive, or part of the executive team, what is the number 1 item or elements that you have to check? So selection A is it's all about business strategy, liability through disproportionately owned. Yeah, mostly it's A, B, and D for me are mostly business strategies. So I would choose here letter C, which is most of the answers in the chat are C. Yes, correct. So the antitrust, as I mentioned earlier, is also known as the competitive laws, which ensures the fair competition within the marketplace.
Okay, and we just have one more question. We're going to blast through this and go on to governance because we do have a jam-packed session. Okay, under federal law, whenever a patient comes to a hospital emergency department with an emergency condition, with few exceptions, the patient's ability to pay may be considered. I don't know, that's got red flags already, even without finishing reading the sentence, and determining whether to provide treatment. With few exceptions, the patient's condition must be stabilized before she is transferred or discharged. Starting to sound better. A police officer may be asked to authorize treatment. I'm not going to go there. I'm not even sure about that. No, I am sure. No, that's not true. The hospital has no duty to treat the person if she is not a patient or member medical staff. Ooh, red flag, red flag. Okay, so the one that doesn't raise a red flag, and that sounds like it's true to the EMTALA that we discussed earlier, it'd be B. So what, okay, B's, I'm seeing B's go, okay, answer is, and there it is. So how many of you had red flags all over A and D, and then C had to think about it and then go, yeah, no, you know? So this one was one of those that it just really, again, if we know anything about a healthcare law, this one was clearly written and raised flags all over the place. Okay. All right, next section, Rick.
Okay, again, lots of stuff in here. And so you want to develop a framework for figuring out how to do it. And I would base my framework around the idea of the triad being the CEO, the chair of the governing board, and the medical staff president as the three power structures in a hospital and how they share it. So if you think of those three and are able to say, okay, well, which decisions are within the board's purview, which are in the medical staff's purview, which is in the CEO's purview, then a lot of the other stuff easily attaches to that. So having that kind of structure will help you when you're reading the material, say in the well-managed healthcare organization. It'll help you organize it in your head and hopefully keep it there. One of the key things that does make healthcare different than normal organizations is the role of the medical staff and the fact that they're not generally part, even when they are employees, they're not part of the same hierarchy that we have in a typical organization. So you should know what those differences are. Next slide.
I'll start with this. I have odd questions. So the finance committee of the board is responsible for monitoring budget, awarding CEO increases and bonuses, acting on behalf of the board in their absence, and permitting joint ventures with other corporations. And I like the way Rick has asked you to clearly look at the function and accountabilities of each of the triad of the board, the CEO as well, and look at what is considered operational performance versus governance. Governing meaning overall arching responsibility. So we have A's, monitoring budget performance. And though B could be part of the board's role, as you put down A, just what does monitoring mean to you in terms of this question? Monitoring, A is true, B is not a committee function. And I think A is monitoring is really kind of what the board's role and responsibility is. And obviously, as we've talked about, there's operations rests with the administration, but monitoring and doing the important part of a broader scope, planning, providing good answers. D, very false, correct. Permitting joint ventures, not a responsibility of the board. Good answers, thanks. We'll next slide. Monitoring budget performance, great.
Okay. Which of the following is included in an organization's mission statement? Ethics, services, strategies, or facilities? What do you guys think? Which of the following should be included in an organization's mission statement? I see a lot of B's. Services, strategies. Okay, B and C. So services, what we offer, strategies, how we're going to get there. All right, let's see what's the answer. Services. All right.
So I like some of the definitions, and you'll have to write that down and just write it different between mission and vision. because that will definitely be asked on the exam. They ask it every time. What's a vision, how to get there, and what's mission, what you do. So strategies, how mission is achieved. So good point. Just write that down over and over so you get that kind of hardwired for you. The duty of loyalty requires that a board member disclose all other assets before becoming a board member. A board member belongs to as few healthcare organizations as possible. A board member refrains from conflicts of interest, and a board member serves out his or her entire term. So we've talked a lot about conflict of interest. Rick has mentioned that will be an overarching themes within the exam. And so a duty, as people have put down, is refrain from conflict of interest, where you have two competing priorities and it will not allow you to complete one of the two. So let's see what our answers are. Next slide. Let's see, and yes, everybody saw that. Thank you.
We've got a smart bunch here.
Can I say something about the duty, different duties? So just some points to remember that you have to, in the exam, you have to remember different differences of the duties, the care, loyalty, disclosure, obedience, and judgment, those kinds of duties. So
Great point.
So the CEO of the hospital reports to board chair, the executive committee of the board, the compensation and evaluation committee of the board, the entire board. So let's see, we go broad, right? What do you guys think? If we're going broad, it's probably D, right? The entire board, vice just one person on the board or a section of the board. So what do we have? Most people wrote D. Okay, and you got it, the entire board.
The danger of having a large board greater than 17. And so as you think about, just committee functionality in general, think in terms of this, because there isn't really a true definition in any of our readings or our texts and all so forth that say what's the optimal, but the danger of a large board is the board can never have a quorum. The board will not be able to elect a chairperson. There will be too many committees, and the executive committee will make all of the important decisions. So just think in terms again of what happens if you have sort of a large unwieldy committee trying to make decisions. And we have some Ds. And what happens when you do have a large committee? People can write things in from their own personal experiences. This is where your own personal experiences will kick in. What happens when you try and come together to either solve an issue or make a decision when you have a large group?
Looks like everyone.
We've got D, yeah. The challenge is, of course, is that you can't get into any depth. You can have conflicting opinions and so forth. So let's see what the answer is.
D.
Perfect. We had someone write that in, that the executive board makes the decisions because of conflicting opinions. That's correct. So.
and then one thing that came up last time that we did this was there was a question on what's the best size of a board. So it's between 9 to 12 based on the well-managed healthcare organization textbook by White. So it's 9 to 12.
Thanks, Michael.
Regarding the hiring of employees, the board should be intimately involved in which of the following positions: all management personnel, all employees within the organization, the CEO, and all clinical personnel. So this one's kind of easy to eliminate because we don't do alls or every or nevers. Or so yeah, I think everyone put C, the CEO. Is that correct? Next slide. Yep. All right. Good job.
All right.
We don't-
Again, just even writing down in your notes, what is the governance structure? And this was not an area of I had in terms of, because I worked for Kaiser Permanente, and a lot of us that have worked in larger organizations, we don't have a lot of exposure to the board. Smaller community hospitals, technically, where the board governs and the CEO reports to the board, is not as common in our areas. So I think just writing down from a global perspective what the committees do and so forth is an important thing. The most critical committee that requires tenured board members is Audit Committee, Finance, Nominating, or Executive Committee. So as you took this even slide, which is often what I did, is I would take a slide or questions that I would get from the review sessions and then just write the definitions next to each. And knowing that if you've been a part of boards or you're looking at this, what is the most critical committee?
When I read this question, it reminds me of the thing about let's eat grandma. Where do you put the comma? Let's eat comma grandma or let's eat grandma. So the question is, are they asking for what is the most critical committee? And because it's critical, it requires tenured board members, or is it a committee that requires tenured board members because it's one of the critical ones? Right? If you don't read it carefully, you could fall into the wrong one. And I think it's a second. They're asking, which of these committees requires tenured board members? The critical really isn't important at this point to me.
And that excellent point, Rick, that brain walk with grandma will be very important because you'll remember that during the exam. So we have D's and this was, as you said, if you're a tenured board member, what would be your value? And that's looking at this. Okay, let's look at the answer here. We'll go to the next slide. And what Rick said is really important is a tenured board, somebody that would be able to set the future course for the board, somebody that could know what the board's been through. So if you're going to look at who would be the future and who would be the next group of board members, tenured board members are usually part of that. As my experience has been, is usually it will be the board chair, but anyone that's really had the experience on the board.
Wow.
I
Okay.
think an ongoing theme that you probably see with today's discussion is how important it is to really read the question. Don't just scan the question and go to the choices. Really spend time making sure you know what it is they're asking.
Okay. A member of the board of a healthcare organization also serves as the medical director of a competing organization. Which one of these duties of a board is applicable to the situation? Okay, so a board of a healthcare organization also serves as a medical director of a competing organization. So what do we have going on there?
Remember what Michael said about knowing your definitions of the different duties.
Right. So I'm seeing quite a few Ds. So duty of care, duty of obedience, business judgment role, or duty of loyalty. So, okay, the crowd is weighing in on D, duty of loyalty. I think that sounds good. Yes, that's correct. Yes, duty of loyalty. Where do your loyalties lie?
So Rick, would the operative word in that have been competing? Is that what would have
Yes, I mean, you
triggered the
can be on the
loyalty?
board of other organizations without having a conflict, but the definition of a conflict is that you've got duties to more than one party and you cannot adequately meet your duty to one without harming the other one. So here, if you're trying to be both the member of a board to which you have a duty of loyalty and the medical director where you have a duty of loyalty, can't do both if they're competing.
It's a conflict of interest, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's the fact that they're competing organizations. If they weren't, there wouldn't be a conflict. You could meet both of your obligations.
Right. Yep.
Okay, and that's the last question in this section. And I do believe we have a few minutes for a Quizlet demonstration. Michael, are you up
Yes.
and ready?
Yep. If can I I'm just gonna share my. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll do some Quizlet. I just wanna tell everyone that the Quizlet, the cognitive levels of the questions here in the Quizlet is more on knowledge, which is the recall and remembering of facts, and comprehension, understanding what are those terms, and you need this basic knowledge and comprehension so that you can answer whatever the question in the board exam as an application. So really, the Quizlet is giving you the basic foundation in order to answer to answer the questions in terms of application in the exam. So that's what I did when I took the exam. So I really learn all the Quizlet, studied the Quizlet. Then when I took the exam, it's more an application. So I remember this in Quizlet, but I was able to segue it to the application portion of the exam. So let's do probably 2 or 3 questions in the interest of time for each body of knowledge areas. So I'm gonna go to the professionalism and ethics, right? So let's go straight to the test, and probably we'll answer 3 multiple choice and 3 or 2 true and false. Question number 1. The duty of healthcare management consultants to avoid conflicts of interests and self-dealing. A, non-maleficence, good faith duty, privacy, medical futility. Can someone read me the answers in the chat box, please?
Yep. Nobody's weighed in yet. All right, we have somebody says B, good faith duty, B. Oh, B's are coming in. The duty of healthcare management control, good faith duty. So we have B.
Okay, I'll choose B.
Okay.
Next question. The ethical principle of acting to help or benefit others. A, autonomy, non-maleficence, justice, beneficence.
We have D.
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Most people put D for that one.
Okay.
D, I'll choose D then, right? Question number 3. The ethically questionable practice of controlling who reproduces, those with desirable genetic makeup, and who should be sterilized, those with hereditary genetic defects, in an attempt to breed a more superior human population. Justice, eugenics, beneficence, or autonomy?
Most people put B, eugenics.
Eugenics, because of probably like genetics, eugenics, right? Okay, so then let's go for true or false, right?
Mhm.
I'll go down. So true or false? Number 1, an ethical decision-making approach that relies on a case's facts, complexity, relevant laws, and unusual circumstances to determine a judgment on that case is known as justice.
Okay.
Ooh, good question.
Mhm.
He says true. We only got 1 response so far. True, up to 2 people say true.
Okay.
Okay. Yep, true, true.
And question number 2, a responsibility under fiduciary duty that requires an individual or a group to act with the same care and prudence that any reasonable entity would exercise is called moral blindness. Moral blindness.
True is what we have here. Most people are saying true.
Yeah, that's true. And one more question.
Sure.
Then and we'll check our answers. Ethically neutral factors in a decision, such as religious doctrine, personal faith, laws and regulations, self-interest, and situational context, is called non-normal concerns. True or false?
People are saying false.
Okay. Okay, and survey says, let's check our answers. Let's go up. Okay, good faith duty is correct. Beneficence is correct, and eugenics is correct.
Great.
Yay. That's 3 out of 3, and the true or false. First question should be false. It's called casuistry. I'm sorry. Instead of justice, it's called casuistry.
Casuistry. Yeah.
We had issues with that one in the last time too, knowing what the definition meant.
Yeah. And number 2 is true. We answered true. Oh, the answer should be false. It is called duty of care instead of moral blindness. And the last one is we also answered false. It should be, it's correct.
No, we got it wrong.
Oh, you got it wrong, right?
Yep, it should have been true.
Yeah, it should have been true, right? Okay.
Well, those were hard.
Yeah.
Now we know where to study.
Let's go back to let's go to the other body of knowledge. That was let's go to laws and regulations, right?
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the test right away. And okay, question number 1 for this knowledge. The federal law that prohibits patient dumping and establishes a duty to render emergency care to those who need it, often referred to as EMTALA. A, Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act. Well, Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, Anti-Kickback Statute, or False Claim Act. This is, I think it's obvious, right?
Everybody's saying B. Yep.
Okay. Let's take that. Number 2, agreement to permit a medical procedure after disclosure of all relevant facts needed to make an intelligent decision. A, covered entity, charitable immunity, unrelated business income, or informed consent. I think this is also obvious.
We have D. Yes. Informed consent.
Yeah. And any health-related information that identifies or can be used to identify the individual to whom it pertains. Charitable immunity, unrelated business income, designated health services, protected health information.
We have D. We have a few D's here.
Okay. Then we'll go down to the true or false. Number 1, true or false. An organization of hospitals, physicians, and other providers who, under a shared governance structure, coordinate patient care and accountable for the quantity and cost of that care and receive bonuses when they deliver care more efficiently, is called community health needs assessment. True or false?
False. We have some false coming through here. False.
Okay. False. Okay. A serious adverse occurrence resulting from failure to follow standard medical practices and generally considered to be negligence per se, an outcome that should never occur is called never event.
We have true.
Okay.
We got some truths. Yep.
And one more question. The venereal principle, now discredited, that a charitable organization is not to be held liable for the wrongful actions of its agent, is called charitable immunity. True or false?
We have 1 true, 1 false, 1 true, false. Oh, we're back. Oh.
It's 50-50?
Yeah. We do not have a consensus here. We have more trues, I think, than false.
Okay, I'll take true. And let's check our answers. Let's go. And EMTALA is correct. It just defined the acronym EMTALA. So
Mhm.
and informed consent is correct, and protected health information is correct.
Great.
For the full, true or false, false is correct. Community health needs assessment is false. True for number 2, it's a never event. And 3 is true, charitable immunity.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Awesome. Good job, you guys.
Hey, 6 out of 6. Yay, we all passed. Let's go to the other
The governance.
governance area. So, oh, there, I already put it there. Okay. Question number 1. A group of agenda items passed without discussion unless a member requests a review used to focus attention on priority matters. Ad hoc committee, consent agenda, strategic business unit, clinical staff organization.
We have an A so far. Anybody else?
Agenda items.
If somebody says B, 2 for B, 3 for B, 4 for B. Okay, let's go with B.
Yeah, okay. Decisions permanently vested in the central corporation of a multi-corporate system. Reserve powers, span of control, management letter, chain of command.
I'm not sure. Let's see. Anybody? Let's see. B, B, A, B. Between A and B. Oh, we have more A's than B's now.
Okay,
Let's go with A.
let's go with A. And the number of subordinates reporting to a supervisor, span of control, reserve powers, credentialing, chain of command.
Got A.
And I think we discussed this also in the business knowledge last week. So
Most people say A, so let's go with A.
let's go to the true or false. The structure of a healthcare organization's clinical staff members for carrying out policies, meeting expectation for quality of clinical care, and communicating with the organization's governing body is called clinical staff organization. True or false?
Let's see. Sure. Clinical center. We have 1 false, 2 false, 3 false, 3 false. Okay, false it is.
False.
All right.
An expansion of organization's mission that expresses intentions, philosophy, and organizational self-image is called vision. True or false?
We have 2 trues, 1 false. True. We have more trues than false.
Okay. And the last true or false question. Comments of external auditors to the governing board that accompany their audited financial report is called reserve powers. True or false?
We have, let's see, we have 1 false, up, 4 false.
Okay.
All right, let's see how we did.
How we did. Well, consent agenda is correct. Reserve powers is correct. Span of control is correct. Yay.
Yeah.
And the true or false, it should be true. The answer should be true.
So we got that one wrong. It should
That
be.
one wrong.
Yep.
And we got this correct. Vision, it's called vision. And the third one is false. We got it correct. I think this is under finance, right? The audited and non-audited reports for finance.
It might be. That's next week. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a good thing the test is multiple choice. We're doing good on those. Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
There was a question about how to access Quizlet. And again, this is the digital access that you get when you purchase the flashcards through ACHE.
Thank you all. Now, next week will be our 2 topics are finance, which is 12% of the exam, and quality, which is 10% of the exam. And we're very excited to have a guest lecturer from Seoul, from San Diego, Lisa Thakur. And we also wanted to ask if there's anything that you want us to cover next week that maybe we haven't covered, or for us to do something differently, or any questions you have, please put those in the chat now and or email us. Really want to make your last session most meaningful for you. Having the conversations in the chat was phenomenal today. That's really shows you're engaged in the topics, and it's hard to stay engaged. These topics are all over the board. So you've done a great job. We're going to have a little competition next week. We are going to have you, if you desire to, as our last session, is pick a beach background that's your favorite, and we're going to have guess that beach, and or exotic location with a beach with water. And then for next Saturday, April 3rd, wear beach wear, attire wear, island wear, anything that you want to. Let's get into the beach groove, and we'll have wonderful prizes available for that. So next week's themes to tie to finance and quality and performance improvement is beach theme. So.
Because we want to all be on the beach to study that one.
And we are appreciating that folks are putting in the chat when they have a target date for their exam, or if they've thought about scheduling an exam. That's really good collegial conversations. And as Nora mentioned, some folks have reached out to us to do their interviews. So we're really be honored to be able to do that for each and every one. So we have committed to getting you out by 11:30, and it's 11:29. So great participation today, and look for our either follow-up emails and then prep for next week. Thank you so much, all. Take care.
Bye. Thank you all. Now, what's the dog's name? I can't remember.
LUC, Luke.
Ah, okay.
I'll stop.